presentation will be on the study we have conducted on leaving no one behind. And I will just give a short background. Leaving no one behind, who are the people left behind per goal in this country? Then the key findings of the study, conclusion, and then end up with the recommendation. As a short background, as you are aware, Sustainable Development Goals were adopted in 2015 by the UN member states, and they aimed at addressing social, economic, and environmental challenges to end poverty, protect the environment, and ensure that all the people enjoy peace and prosperity through partnership by 2030. It has 5 key principles: universality, integration, and the key one is leaving no one behind. And these goals are interconnected and indivisible. They are inclusive and carry a multi-stakeholder engagement, which we have now. So I will concentrate on the people who are left behind. Now, there are 17 goals. Out of the 17 goals, of course, the targets are 169 with 231 indicators. And for the case of Uganda, it's only 201, according to Uganda Bureau of Statistics, the indicators that can be measured. But currently, we have 121 data points of the indicators, which can tell us the story in this country. Now, leaving no one behind is central transformative promise of the 2030 agenda. And it does not entail reaching the poorest of the poor, but also requires combating discrimination and raising inequalities within and amongst countries. People get left behind when they lack the choices and opportunities to participate in and benefit in the development progress. And in this respect, the government of Uganda, with support from the UN Women, conducted a study on leaving no one behind, a study looking at all the 17 goals, who are left behind per goal. And there is a framework, according to the UN, which describes the categories of these people we are talking about. And briefly, there are people who are discriminated. There are those, of course, discriminated because of geography, where they stay. And then there are those who are vulnerable. The other one is the governance, and then socio-economic status. But briefly, I will look at that. Now, on the discrimination, the subgroup identified as having suffered discrimination in the development and humanitarian interventions, which include people with disabilities, and we have been able to put the data of the people who are disabled. Approximately, for the case of adults, we have 16.5%. For the children, for the younger people between 15 and 17, they are 7.5, and then children below 4 years, 3.5. These ones here are disabled, need support, and they are left behind. That's what they are saying. They are left what? Behind. Then there are older persons who constitute 4.1% in the population. There are women and girls, and the majority of them are saying they are left behind, and they constitute 51% of the population. Then we have refugees who have come from other countries and have taken refuge in this country, and approximately we have 1.5 million persons who are there. But there are people who are usually forgotten, who are scenic minorities. They live in the forests, as you can see, and as we shall highlight when we look at the data. Now, for the case of geography, in this country, there are people, communities living in mountainous areas. We have the pygmies, we usually call the Batwa, in Chisoro, and some in the Bundubujo district, the Tepes in the Moroto district, and the Kabong district, and the Benet in the Queen district, plus many others who live in the mountains, in the forests. And then the nomadic communities, like the Karamajong, We used to have also the Ankole cattle keepers, now that they have started settling, but somehow, because they follow animals, they are somehow discriminated. That's what they are saying. Then lastly, we have the fishermen and women communities like in Karangara, Buvuma, etc. Now, for the case of vulnerability to shocks, the assessment identified such a subgroups to include the refugees, they are still in that category, persons affected by COVID-19, Ebola, HIV/AIDS, plus very many other diseases. But these were the most common ones who have affected those people who are left behind. And then the ethnic minorities still are in that category. But the study has also identified the urban poor. We have about 4.5 million people almost going there in Kampala city. And when it comes to night, of course, you don't see any person. Where do they disappear from? They are just there looking for survival. So they are also left behind. But even you have the working class. People working, they are employed, but they are left behind. Their salaries are low. There are even some working without contracts. So they are categorized in that area. Then the governance. In the governance, the report gives groups, of course, the youth. You have the persons with disabilities, refugees, older persons, and in the governance here, we looked at the 4 thematic areas of governance. The first one is the democratic political governance, where most of the people were affected because of politics, where you find in some areas people have not voted for their relatives, their friends, and they are ignored. And they are left behind and they suffer for all that particular period. Persons with disabilities, again, they are finding it a problem. Refugees, and then older persons. Socio-economic status also is one of the categories in the framework that most of these people who are left behind are in. We have the persons with disabilities, who have indicated the adults, for example, 16.5. We have the working poor, the older persons, the youth, the ethnic minorities. All of these are affected. And of course, socially, we are looking at education, you are looking at health, water and sanitation, etc. And what are the key findings? And very quickly, in the interest of time, I will rush through the key findings. For the case of no poverty subgroup, the people living with HIV/AIDS, rural and urban poor, persons belonging to ethnic minorities, disabilities, older persons, is it. So you can see the trend from 56.4 in the early 90s to 20.3 in the last 3 years. So while Uganda continued to register moderate economic growth in recent years, poverty reduction has been slow. But what has the government done to solve the issue of poverty? The records indicate that the government has done quite a lot. There is Bonabagagawale program, which, of course, was there for some time. The Youth Livelihood Program, the Social Assistant Grant for the Elderly, the EMIOGA, the Parish Development Model, which is there. Government has sunk in a lot of money. So what have we done to end this, to end poverty, when the government has put up all the strategies, all the money? So there must be something wrong, which in our discussions must come up with actions, with strategies to make sure that we utilize what is already available. Then for the case of hunger, the persons affected are almost the same people. And you can see when you look at the percentage of food poor households, I have picked some few areas in this country where you start, for let's say Kampala, 20% of the people don't have enough of the food they are eating. And then nationally, you see 37 the previous year, and this year it is 39. And the highest, of course, Acholi, followed by Karamoja. And what does that mean? It means that from the figure, as you can see, 3 in every 10 households don't consume sufficient quantity of food, and that's important. They are in the rural areas, and that category of people I've been talking about who are left behind, the youth, the women, the elderly, They are eating food, but it is not sufficient. It is not even nutritious. When you go to some areas, you find the children, they have eaten food, the stomach is just very high, the buttocks is flat, and the head is so big. Now, what do you expect from this younger person? When he grows up and produce children, how will the children look like? But there is a national food and nutrition strategy which has been put in place by government to improve the nutrition status of the undernourished children. Then for the case of the good health and well-being, people affected are pregnant mothers, women and girls, persons belonging to ethnic minorities, fisher folk, and pastoral communities, the youth, the refugees, IDPs, and the working older people and the younger people, and mostly the diseases affecting people. Mostly we have malaria, HIV, AIDS, against others. But the government has put strategies like immunization policy, and it's good that, of course, with this policy, it has yielded some results which are positive. We no longer have many people suffering from polio. If they ask you to look for one, you may take years to look for that particular person, which is okay. Distribution of treated mosquito nets, national policy guidelines on ending HIV have been on. So what have we done to ensure health lives for all? And of course, here we are looking at the people who are left behind, which may not include us here. We are not affected. You are not among that group. We are looking at the other people I have been talking about. Then for the case of quality of education, the people affected, mostly women, adolescent girls, people with disabilities, children, pastoral communities, etc. And the data there indicate, if we look at literacy rates for this country, we are now at 73, with 80 males and 66 females. Of course, still now, we noted at the beginning that we have 51% of the females, and yet, when you look at literacy, the males are higher, so something must be worked on. But again, we need to make 100%, make sure that people are functionally literate. They can read, can add, and do whatever. But the government has put on good programs for both younger people and older people to make sure that people are functionally competent. There is early childhood care and education policy. There is universal primary education, which allows all children of eligible age to go to school and study free. Universal secondary education, functional adult literacy. Those programs are running in villages for people who didn't get a chance to go to school. And religious leaders are doing quite a lot to that one there for SDGs. We thank you so much. And then skilling the youth TVT program, which is there for people who have dropped out. They can join that one. So if we have all of these strategies, facilities, then why is it that when you look at the functional competencies of our younger people at different levels, they are average, some are below average. And yet we have these strategies. Should we develop other strategies apart from these ones here? Or concentrate on these ones here, and we all work together and make sure that it works out. Then, the gender inequality, the ethnic minority plus people with disabilities are most affected in this one here, girls and fisher person. You can see a lady there, this gender, women with disabilities experiencing more physical and sexual violence, a man fighting with a woman. And what we discovered in the study is that even now women have started beating men. They are very strong. They have come up, not like those days. The other issue of religion is that don't touch your husband, no way. It can't work. You disturb her, you see what happens. We have gender policy strategy and women emancipation strategy, but most of the women and the girls were saying that they are left behind. And as the emancipation, government has done well from the top. You have heard of the vice president, the prime minister, the right honorable is here. She's a woman. Then we have the speaker of parliament and even the local leaders. When we were in the regional meetings, you saw that actually women were taking leadership and were doing very well. But now, the other women from the other subgroups are complaining they are not included. from the ethnic minorities, we are not having a minister from there. They are saying now why? Why don't we have such? 6 is the water and sanitation. People suffering, mostly ethnic minorities, people with disabilities, older persons, women, working group. And according to the sanitation and the environmental development plan, government has been able, I think, to provide water, urban 90%, in the rural 75%. But then the other group, the subgroup, suffers because they are not able even to utilize the water which is around. If you go to the slums, they have to pay for that water. And they cannot even cheat because they put a padlock on every tap. So they are saying they need to be considered so that they are not left behind. Then for the case of the 7th one, on energy, subgroups suffering under that one are older persons, ethnic minorities, fisher folk, pastoral communities. They are suffering. So the problem is the high cost of electricity, averaging to about 25,000 shillings, which is too high for the other living behind, because we are talking of people who are left behind. Can they manage electricity? And you can see that high power voltage, government has provided infrastructure, but then where it goes in rural areas, they don't see that power. But there are other strategies, of course, like using the solar, biogas, etc., which they can use, but they can't manage. The one on the on economic growth, subgroups, of course, mostly people affected are women and girls, and then people with disabilities, youth, and working poor. Now, according to the graph, you will notice that government has been able to commit efforts to eliminate the child labor. Child labor, very important, especially in the worst forms. However, child labor is still high, especially in northern Uganda, younger people. And you will notice that according to the National Labor Force Survey report, which came out last month, a high proportion of the youth, which is 41%, were not employed. 41% not employed. They are not even educated, and they are not attending even any training at all. And it is 41%. So we need to look at this category. But the government has put strategies which can alleviate that one there. The National Employment Policy, which does not allow child labor, though it is still on. The presidential skilling on a girl and a boy child. And results, I don't have data, but for this skilling project of the president has generated some good results, where younger people who have passed through this one here are able now to generate income. So I think we need to support that program and make sure that we have more younger people trained. Then the one, number 9, on innovations and infrastructure. The group suffering most is older persons, women, girls, ethnic minorities, fisher folk communities, slum dwellers, and working poor. Now here, we will find that government has made tremendous infrastructure development projects. In the past years, we have many roads coming, which have come up, factories and industries coming up. But then again, we are looking at the people left behind. And these people left behind, you will find that the infrastructure we have put on to support value addition, especially agriculture production, is a bit low. And that's why we have put a diagram there, which is modern, of course, irrigation, which is modern. And we have water, I think a lot of water here, which we can utilize to irrigate so that we can generate food. But on the diagram, again, you see a lot of agriculture, which is like animals, products, honey, you have tractors, whatever, but those cannot be used to generate the outputs which we are talking about. But there is agricultural value chain development projects which are up. Now, the other one is on inequalities, People are suffering here, people with disabilities, employment, poor, ethnic minorities, pastoral communities, and the fisher communities. And on the budget there, they are saying that, of course, there is a budget, but it does not cater for the other people who are left behind, the elderly, people with disabilities, etc. And you see that person with a cake, eating it alone, and the others are wondering. But then somewhere in the middle, you see, of course, girls and boys are equal, and that's what now some of the strategies are. They are all equal, but in practice, when it comes to employment, you will see the woman ending up in the kitchen, cooking, and the other man just walking in a briefcase, getting work. So employment, again, becomes the problem. So government has put in an Equal Opportunity Commission, which I think has done some good work, and then certificates of compliance. Even the NPA has developed that, and it has generated some positive results. But there are development and pacification programs which government have put in place, like for northern Uganda, to make sure that the people who are left behind are supported. Now, with the sustainable cities, people suffering with the cities, people with disabilities, elderly, urban poor, youth, women, and the streets. And of course, you will notice that there is failure of the city authorities to include the living no one behind when they are planning. There is limited walkways, limited gazetted green zones, and then limited garbage disposals in most of our cities, as you can see on the left-hand side. But the government has established more cities. We have extra 10 cities now, as you notice. And there is also a strategy on green growth. So how do we make sure that these cities can provide for the other people whom we have mentioned? Number 12, on consumption, the people left behind are women and youth, almost the same people. And mostly on this goal, number 12, on consumption and production, the key indicator we are looking at is procurement. Why procurement? Because almost 60% of government's money goes through procurement. But when we are procuring, these people are left behind. They don't get contracts. They are eliminated. So they are saying, why don't we be included and be given some projects, some surprise, small consultancies, so that we can also survive. That's why now you see that motorcycle with no tires, it cannot move. Procurement, it cannot move because they are left behind. These are the other younger people. Number 13 is climate change. People mostly suffering, almost the same people. Older persons, women, children, people with disabilities. And you can see the country has faced disastrous moments that have led to deaths as a result of extreme weather conditions. For example, the number of deaths, missing persons, and directly affected persons attributed to disasters have increased from 103 in 2018 to 130 in 2020 by 100,000 people. So there is limited awareness of the climate change amongst the people, and this is a strategy the Ministry of Water has put in place, and our permanent secretary tomorrow will be telling us exactly how is this strategy going to work to make sure that the climate change issue is worked on. Then the life underwater, the government of Uganda has escalated efforts in restoration and degraded fragile ecosystems. But then you can see that is just near the land sites where there are bottles, empty bottles, etc. And there is a problem which needs to be worked on. But here we only have one indicator we are measuring because we are not near the oceans, and so of course where majority of the countries are affected. Then number 15, this one here is life on land. And of course, life on land, we are talking of deforestation and desertification caused by human activities still remains a challenge. In Uganda, for example, Uganda has an annual loss of 2% of the trees being cut by human beings. And as you can see, this one affects tourism industry. It affects also because the forests provide 81% of the energy, and this one is it. But of course, there is a national climate strategy which has been put in place to make sure that one is alleviated. I'm about to finish. Then the other group on peace and justice, we have people affected there, women, refugees, elderly people, and of course there is delayed justice for victims of sexual and gender-based, and of course this subgroup has been receiving support to access legal assistance and legal remedies, but still it is not enough in the courts of law. We shall hear from the Chief Justice tomorrow what strategies they have to make sure that people left behind in this category are left behind. And I think they have developed strategies, so he will tell us tomorrow. And lastly, on number 17, on partnerships, the same grass are the same which are affected, and one indicator that is prominent is actually mobile phones. They are very, very important, because if people are connected, they are able to know exactly what is happening, and they are able to engage in the trade. So these people, if they can get mobile phones, know how to use mobile phones, connected to the internet, then the rest will solve itself. Conclusion, for most of the subgroups I have mentioned, continue to suffer inequality and discrimination due to policy, legal, and institutional dysfunction affecting the inclusion in the development and humanitarian delivery mechanisms. However, a number of government strategies still exist to address, as I have mentioned, per every goal. We have enough strategies which can solve that one. So what do we recommend? We recommend that we increase awareness among the subgroups we have talked about, and tell them about the opportunities which are available, like the parish development model, and their rights and their responsibilities. That's why the Prime Minister has invited all the arms of government so that we handle the problem together. Then there is inclusion of this category in the budgeting, planning, and implementation. That's why even the planning issue is. And I hope National Planning Authority does that when they are planning, to make sure they are not left behind. Then increase the funding, infrastructure expansion and rehabilitation, and finally strengthen the partnerships across the stakeholders. And that's why now this conference has invited all of the people. We have a mixture of all of the people who are actually implementing the SDGs. So I thank you so much, and we are saying leaving no one behind, the strategy I want to have. Thank you.